And that'll also allow you to record and download the chat after the meeting, correct?
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I hope so. I will copy it, do the old-fashioned copy and paste to a separate document.
Thank you for that, Marcia. I just want to make sure we've got our bases covered with that, because I see it looks like I can record as well. So if I need to, I can play back up, I think.
Okay.
Okay.
Welcome, everyone. We'll just give a couple more minutes for more folks to join and be admitted. Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is James Walkinshaw. I represent the Braddock District on the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors, and welcome to our community information meeting on the proposed affordable housing on the Fairfax County Government Center campus. Before we get started, just to remind you, this meeting is being recorded so that we'll be able to share it with those who weren't able to join us tonight. I'll talk through the agenda for the evening, recognize some folks who are here, and then we'll go right into the presentations. We're going to have two presentations this evening. The first will be a presentation on the Comprehensive Plan Amendment from Ryan Stewart of the Planning Division of Fairfax County Department of Planning and Development. Next, we'll have a presentation on the rezoning application from the developers and their representatives, Brian Winterhalter and Nick Bracco. After both presentations, we'll take your questions and hear your comments, and then I'll wrap things up. A few folks that I want to recognize. We have a number of folks who have been working on this project and part of this process from Fairfax County, from the Planning Division of the Department of Planning and Development, Megan Van Dam and Michael Linsky, from the Zoning Evaluation Division of the Department of Planning and Development, Emma Estes, from the Department of Housing and Community Development, Tom Fleetwood, Anna Shapiro, Mark Buenavista, and Anwar Iqbal. From the Braddock District, I know we have a number of members of the Braddock District Land Use and Environment Committee. We have a Braddock District Planning Commissioner, Mary Cortina, and from my office, my senior legislative aide for land use, Marcia Pape. And before we go into the first presentation for this evening, I'll just say we're here to get your feedback and your comments and hear your thoughts on what I think is a really exciting opportunity for Fairfax County, the opportunity to take what is an underutilized parking lot at the main Fairfax County Government Center and convert it to affordable housing and childcare for low and moderate income families in the county. It's a key location, a key strategic location for us in Fairfax County, close to the main government center and other employment centers. Very close, right around the corner from a new multimodal commuter parking garage where folks can walk and bike and get express buses to go directly downtown to job centers, close to Fairfax Corner, shopping, restaurants, employment, close to Fair Oaks Mall. So a really key part of the county that I think has tremendous potential, and the opportunity to have affordable housing right there is really incredible. That said, we're here to get your thoughts on the proposal that you're going to see. We want to hear your questions. We want to hear your feedback in advance of the Planning Commission hearing that's scheduled on December 8th and a subsequent Board of Supervisors hearing on this proposal. So nothing has been decided. Nothing is final. We're here tonight to get your thoughts and feedback before we move forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ryan Stewart to give us some of the ground rules and present the comprehensive plan amendment. Ryan.
Great, thank you, Supervisor Walkinshaw. So this is the first portion of the presentation this evening is on the plan amendment, the comprehensive plan amendment for the affordable housing at the government center. So just to orient you, this is the Fairfax County Government Center campus. Many of you are aware that this is the seat of government for Fairfax County. It's got offices where the Board of Supervisors meets, as well as a number of county agencies and departments call this their administrative home. The Fairfax County Housing and Redevelopment Authority is a separate entity from the Board of Supervisors, and its mission is to provide opportunities for Fairfax County residents to live in safe, affordable housing. And in 2017, it opened what's known as the Residences at Government Center. There you can see it on the right of your screen in the box. It's a 270 apartment affordable housing development on the campus for those earning up to 60% of the area median income. The community's success is seen as a real model of an innovative partnership between the Housing or Redevelopment and Housing Authority and private developers for a way to use county land in order to build affordable housing at no additional cost to local taxpayers. And so with that model in mind, in 2020, the Board of Supervisors conveyed parking lots T and H of the Government Center campus, shown here, to the Housing Authority for similar purposes. Since that time, the Housing Authority has partnered with a developer, Lincoln Avenue Capital, and they're here this evening and will be presenting on their proposal later on. But they've got a proposal to develop this 4.5 acre site. Now, before it's constructed, there are a number of steps that need to take place. We are at the stage now where we've actually just at the beginning of the process where we've reviewed an initial concept from the applicant, and now we have some entitlement actions to go through, an amendment to the county's comprehensive plan, and also a rezoning amendment for the Government Center campus as a whole. And this evening, my focus will be on the plan amendment side of things. Then we'll talk about the rezoning as well that will be coming up afterwards. So the comprehensive plan amendment, tonight we're going to introduce it, and as the supervisor mentioned, we're going to want your feedback, and this is going to set the stage for some public hearings on the plan amendment and the future rezoning discussions. The first public hearing is scheduled December 8th with the Planning Commission, and then we would anticipate having a Board of Supervisors hearing in January. So where we are on the agenda tonight, I'm going to talk about the context of the comprehensive plan. What's the comprehensive plan, and what policies and guidelines are in play. Talk about the plan amendment itself, overview, and the next steps in the process. We'll then move on to a presentation by the applicant, Brian Winterhalter and Nick Bracco, and they'll talk about their rezoning application. We'll move on to a moderated question and comment, in which I hope that all of you would participate in that. And then we'll conclude with some closing comments. Now, before we get started, I know that many of you have heard about this meeting or are living in the area of the Government Center. If you wouldn't mind in the chat, if you're comfortable, if you could please just let us know where you are located and how you might have heard of this meeting. We're trying to judge the effectiveness of our outreach and engagement here. And so, always looking for ways to improve and reach more people. So that would really help us out. So a few ground rules. As we mentioned, this meeting is being recorded and will be available online. We will be posting this recording, assuming all goes well from a technical standpoint, posting that to the project website. So those of you who would like to view it again, or for those people who weren't able to make it tonight, will be able to see it. So as such, we would ask that you treat this as a public forum, just as you would in a person meeting. We would ask to remain on mute at all times until you're called on, and we will have questions and discussion at the end for a verbal discussion. But of course, you're welcome to add to the chat at any time, and we'll circle back around and be sure to answer those questions as well. During the Q&A period, you can continue to use the chat, or please use the function to raise your hand, and we'll be sure to call on you. And for those of you who need it, closed captioning is available. There's a live transcript feature here on the bottom bar of your Zoom application, and clicking that will allow you to access that feature as a way to able to read the content on screen in live as it occurs. So let's talk a little bit. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of the plan amendment itself, let's talk a little bit about what the comprehensive plan is. Many of you have heard the term, the comprehensive plan, but what does it do exactly? It's used as a guide in decision-making about built and natural environment here in the county. You can think of this as a living document of policy and of guidance for how the county wants to develop into the future. Now, I should note that this a comprehensive plan contains recommendations. It's not law or regulation, as is, say, the zoning ordinance or the building code. These are simply policy guidance that allows a framework for decision makers to base their decisions and recommendations on. So people who use the comprehensive plan, most often when you look at a particular land action, you have the Board of Supervisors, the Planning Commission, and the Board of Zoning Appeals, and of course the community. You've got the development community who would be interested in putting forward a proposal. You've got other members of the community, interested stakeholders, all of whom have are able to use the plan as a resource. What's in it? It talks about land use guidance, some transportation guidance, environmental stewardship, public facilities, and other major topics, which we'll get into talking about. But you should know that this is a long-standing thing. Our first comprehensive plan here in the county was adopted in the 1950s, and it has been continually evolved and modernized as the county develops into the present day. So the comprehensive plan, it's a statutory mandate. Not only is it a good idea to have a comprehensive plan, but it's also something that is required by code that every jurisdiction would have a guidance document of this type. Having this allows us to manage growth and preserve the environment in a way that's proactive and in a way that's it's got a long vision to it. So we're able to see, how we want things to develop and plan accordingly. Now, by statute, it's reviewed every 5 years by our Planning Commission, and updates are made as necessary. You'll see here, I'll talk about some different ways that we amend the plan and different ways that we can go about adopting new guidance into the plan outside of that time frame. But here in Fairfax, you'll see that the comprehensive plan is expressed in terms of goals, objectives, and policies in the policy plan, and then it's followed up by 4 different area plans that breaks the county up into geographic areas. And from there, it breaks it down even further into other subdivisions. And then with the comprehensive plan, the way in which it is enacted is through local ordinances and regulations, as I mentioned, such as the zoning ordinance is one of the primary ways in which the guidance of the comprehensive plan is actually put down on the paper and enacted. Now, I mentioned that this is a living document, and that's really important for a comprehensive plan because you want the plan to remain relevant to the current development situation, the current land use situation, the current market conditions. And there are many ways to amend the plan. We have here in the county what's known as the Comprehensive Plan Amendment Work Program, which is a broad way of saying, this is the county program that amends the comprehensive plan. We do so through area-wide planning studies where we're looking at a specific geographic area, not at the parcel or at the neighborhood, perhaps, but at a wider geographic area. You have county-wide and policy plan amendments that address issues that pertain to the entire county. This might be an environmental policy or historic resources or urban development or something along these lines that really affect everyone within the county. We have board authorized amendments that the Board of Supervisors will authorize and direct staff to undertake from time to time. And then we have a site-specific plan amendment process. Now, we are currently transitioning from a north-south county cycle to a more county-wide approach to the SSPA process. But this is where the public or others are able to submit nominations for specific amendments that they would like to see. I should mention that the plan amendment process that we're discussing tonight is only really like I mentioned, it's the first start of what we call the planning and development life cycle. This follows a project all the way from its initial concepts to where you can think of this maybe as no more than, say, a sketch on a napkin, so to speak. The planning and zoning review is the entitlement phase where any comprehensive plan amendments would take place. If something would need to be rezoned or if a land would need to be granted certain entitlements, this is where that would take place. Following that, we have site design, where the plans that were developed in the planning and zoning review process are further refined. Those plans are then reviewed and building permits are issued. We then have the construction, the actual groundbreaking, followed by the relevant inspections and things of that nature. occupancy is the period where the building is occupied and used and enjoyed by the public. And then, at the end of the life cycle of the building, the building is either, it could be demolished, it could be renewed, it could be replaced with another building, but then the cycle starts over where you have a concept for a new project, and that may require additional planning and zoning. But you can see here, the point is that the plan amendment process is really at the start of the process, and it's really one small part of a wider overall whole. So how does all of this fit into land development? Well, you can see I've divided this slide up here by levels of detail, and I think that this is helpful to show what portions of the comprehensive plan and the rezoning and entitlement phase and land development phase are covered in what level of detail. Broadly speaking, we've got the policy plan of the comprehensive plan. Again, that's the broad county-wide guidance. We've got area-wide guidance that focuses on those smaller geographical areas, and then site-specific guidance that can either be best expressed as part of a land unit in some cases, or even parcel-based, as the case may be. And you'll see there in the comprehensive plan on those different levels of policies or guidance that may apply to a specific area. Now, all of that information then is fed into the entitlement process, where during the rezoning review, an application is evaluated on its merits and on its impacts and on its conformance with the guidance in the comprehensive plan. And that requires more detail than what would be presented in the comprehensive plan amendment. And then, following that, I mentioned is the land development, where we go into site planning and permitting, and that yet requires another level of detail here. And so I kind of think of this as, site planning and permitting might be a place where you would address, say, fire alarms in the building. That might not be mentioned in the rezoning, or it might. I don't know, it's case dependent, but then it's probably not something that would really be handled in the comprehensive plan. So this is a structure that goes from broad to specific. And tonight, again, we're focused on the comprehensive plan in this portion of the presentation. So let's talk about the plan amendment itself. So this plan amendment, in furtherance of supporting affordable and workforce housing, staff is asked to consider increasing the development intensity of the government center campus to a 0.4 FAR in development intensity. So an FAR is floor to area ratio. You can think of that as a way of measuring how intensely a given property is developed. So like a 1-to-1 ratio would be there's as much development as there is area on the property. And that could be, say, a single-story building that occupies the entire property. It could be a two-story building that occupies half the property, so on and so forth. But it's a measurement of how densely a given property is developed. Here's a bit of a slide showing the context of the government center campus, just to orient yourselves. We have here the surrounding the main government center building, which you can see here is the horseshoe-shaped building there in the center. We've got the parking lots serving the building. We've got across the street the public safety headquarters, Harity Building and Panino Building, that house our police, fire, rescue services, our building and development and other services, and then our family services and neighborhood services over in Panino are the primary tenants in those spaces. We have the residence at government center, which I mentioned earlier is the affordable housing that's already on the government center site. And you see here, the open space is characterized by a ceremonial space that leads into the government center. This is primarily reserved for First Amendment and forum activities where people can gather and they can address their government officials in a peaceful manner. We have the ellipse that's mostly used for some open space, some recreation, and some organized events. And then we've got here surrounding the campus, we've got some wooded areas, we've got stream valley, and we've got pretty much a natural environment that's been managed by our Department of Public Works to really be in many ways, it's a showcase for environmental restoration. And there are some trails in there, and so the public is welcome to enjoy nature in those spaces as well. Outside of the campus to the north, we have the Fairfax Corner, which is the or the mixed-use development with the movie theater. There's commercial spaces and also residences there as well. We've got housing surrounding the campus to the northwest, the northeast and the southwest and the south. And then over to the southwest, we also have the West Fairfax Elementary School and the Fair Chase Apartments. And then to the north, next to the government center, we have the commuter garage. So you can see it's a good mix of public facilities, private residential facilities, and also commercial spaces. Now, I'm going to introduce to you the Fairfax Center area of which the Government Center campus is a part. Now, this is a planning designation within the comprehensive plan. I had mentioned that the plan divides the county up into specific areas for more detailed planning. And the Fairfax Center and the Fairfax Center suburban area are one of those development centers where we might expect to see a more intense development as a result of access to public transit, access to employment, population centers, this sort of thing. It's one of several different suburban centers here in the county. And we'll talk about that here shortly. But you can see where we are in terms of the area. We're bounded by 50 to the north and 29 to the south, and Route 66 bisects going east to west. Now, the Fairfax Center area was initially, when it was planned, it was envisioned as an employment-focused mixed-use area with residential as a secondary use. The plan was first adopted in 1982, and since that time, the area has evolved to really include a wide mix of uses, everything from offices to residences to a number of public facilities, such as the government center. We have some regional and community serving amenities, such as the Fairfax Mall. And we've also got a number of mixed-use developments, as I mentioned. The Fairfax Corner development is one of these such developments that you may be familiar with. Just recently, within the last few years, about 2006 or so, we updated the guidance for the Fairfax Center area to basically adapt it to the current development conditions and to the development scenarios that we saw, for the future. This was adopted by the Board of Supervisors, but really established the suburban center as a premier place to live, work, and play. So you would have all of these activities kind of co-located together, as it were. The greatest intensity of development would be around planned public transit along the I-66 corridor near Fairfax Mall, Fairfax Corner, and the Government Center. And so really being able to leverage access to public transit and to future mobility opportunities in a way where people are able to get to work, get to places to play, places to live, without necessarily relying on an automobile, as was the vision in the past. So in looking at the broader Fairfax Center area, I'll just show you, this is what we call the concept for future development. This is what we have in the comprehensive plan, where we've got the Fairfax Center area further divided by land units. You can think of a land unit as, say, a neighborhood or a smaller area, or even a sub area of the wider geographical boundaries here. But in the Fairfax Center area, we've got low density residential and suburban neighborhoods on the outskirts. You see here in the lighter pink, we've got the suburban center, which is the core or the non-core area. And then we have the core of the suburban center around, here we have land units A and B there in the center of the graphic. And you can see the government center campus kind of straddles the area that's within the core and just outside of the core. And so each of these areas have specific guidance for the types of development that should occur in these areas, what the public has said that they wanted to see in these areas, and the character of each. And I'll talk about that here. Now, we're fortunate with this particular plan amendment because we're already working in an area of the county where the wider plan guidance outside of the government center already covers a lot of different aspects of what we might look for in the guidance that would be used to guide this particular affordable housing. We have here land use and urban design. So you'll see that the plan talks about things such as the type of mixed use development that would be appropriate here, the type of architecture that might be suitable. We have guidance on some signage and what that might look like. We have language that promotes trail connectivity and being able to get from point A to point B in a way that, as I mentioned, doesn't necessarily rely on an automobile. So you'll see it's very heavy on pedestrian friendly and multimodal biking and walking, the ability to do that. The plan talks about open space and how that's designed and how these spaces are able to provide both recreation and environmental benefits to the area's residents. And then the text also talks about buffers and transitions. And so, we've got all of these different types of uses kind of co-located in one place. How do we transition between those uses, and how do we provide appropriate buffers, and so these uses are not encroaching upon each other? Importantly, you'll also see some guidance on transportation and access. I mentioned the multimodal component of this, and you'll see that there's really a heavy emphasis on how people are getting around. That includes the provisions for greater trails, greater bike connections, safe connections, looking at how the roadway network functions and how traffic circulates, but also parking management. We don't want to discount cars completely. We know that they're a part of life, and they still have a very valuable use in people getting to work. And so, how do we manage that parking appropriately? We've got a section here that talks about the environment. We have guidance pertaining to water quality and stormwater management, and how to protect our waterways and our water quality under the Chesapeake Bay and its watershed. How to protect critical habitat that might be present, whether that's for flora or fauna or other types of wildlife. Looking at provisions for tree cover and its role in overall environmental quality. Protection from the heat island effect, protection from climate change and that sort of thing. Looking at soils and both preserving soils in terms of preventing erosion, and also looking at what soils are more or less suitable to development. And then particularly when we look at development of public facilities, and I'll talk about this a bit more, we have a pretty robust section on green building and the types of construction practices that would best lead to an environmentally sustainable and energy efficient building. And we have guidance that will guide that when it comes to building new county facilities or really any type of building where someone would have that sort of goal in mind. Now, one thing I particularly like about the Fairfax Center area plan that some other areas don't necessarily have is we have use-specific performance guidance. Now this gives, but beyond the guidance that's already there, this gives another layer of design guidance and another layer of, say, aesthetic and site planning guidance, as it were, in that it shows how certain types of buildings, the types of things that they would have in order to, fulfill the vision of the plan, so to say. So like in this graphic to the left, we might have a residential building, and you can see here we've got a prominent primary entry that's on a roadway. We've got access to a pool. We've got some parking that's been screened from the surrounding uses. We've got some provisions for pedestrian connectivity and access to a park and tennis and recreational opportunities. All of these things that go into supporting that residential development and improving the quality of life for the people who live there. You can see here we've got another graphic for what a multifamily building might look like, just as a concept, but you can see the division between the drop-off zone for people who are visiting the building and the service area in the rear. You can see the need to screen the mechanical equipment, and you provide access to buses and provide landscaping on site. So all of these things are again guidance, but they help to really illustrate to the plan reviewers, to the public, and to the development community the types of development that the Fairfax Center should encourage and should develop as. Specific to the core area, we're going to I'll just briefly go over this here, but we have really transforming into an auto-oriented suburban character into the interconnected urban transit and pedestrian friendly place. Like I mentioned, we want to have basically a transition from more of the suburban character to the urban character to really leverage the provision of mass transit in the area. And plan goes into great detail about this. Okay. In addition to the government center campus itself, the plan amendment addresses land units F and I3 here that surround the government center campus. The campus itself is in B2 and I3. But part of our authorization here is to update the land unit guidance here to reflect the current land uses. These units were originally developed as part of the original government center. They've since been developed for private, commercial, or residential development. F, you may know as the location of where the Whole Foods is and the mixed-use development over there. And then I3 is the residential components just to the east of the government center. And so they're no longer part of the public lands, they're in the private domain. And so the plan amendment would seek to update that and decouple, I should say, or detach or separate the government center campus from those private developments. You can see here's how they're planned. I won't go into great detail here, but you can see at the government center campus, we are planned for office mixed use and public facilities. And then over in land units F and I3, we have the residential components, which are also under the office mixed use. And so you see the mixture of uses intended for those sites. So just in summary here, I know I've gone through a lot here, and I know it's a lot of information to digest, but as we're going forward with the comprehensive plan amendment, we really want to consider first of all, how this proposal fits within the existing comprehensive plan. We're looking at the office mixed use and the public facilities would remain on the government center campus. The residential component is within that office mixed use by definition. And so we don't really see this as a change of use, but we would be looking at a greater level of development intensity going from 0.35 up to 0.4 FAR, that floor to area ratio. You know, as we look at any changes that might be necessary for the plan amendment, you know, how do we best implement that Fairfax Center area vision and guidance that I spoke about earlier, and how do we really distill that down and provide some guidance for what this might look like at the government center? We want to look at the impacts of what affordable housing at the entrance to the county seat and this mixed use area, and what its impacts would be on the existing public facilities and infrastructure, and how well the government center campus is serving the public. And again, we want to have those editorial changes to land units F and I3 to reflect past development. And of course, we want to hear from you. We want to know, is there anything that we're missing or anything that we should particularly focus on as members of the community? What do you see? Now, I won't go into great detail here, but this slide is just, in a way, it's a transition over to the discussion that we'll have here on the rezoning, but this is what has been proposed by the applicant, and it gives an idea of what the future development of this site might look like. You can see here there's two buildings. It's a multifamily residential complex. It's got a daycare center, some open space, trail connectivity, and you see some parking around the outskirts. But I'll let our applicants talk about that in greater detail. In discussing the project schedule here, it's currently the end of September already. In November, we would expect to have a staff report on the plan amendment published. That's the staff's opinion, or I should say the recommendations and analysis for the proposed text for the plan amendment. And then in December, we'll have that plan amendment going to the Planning Commission for public hearing, as I mentioned. And we look to have some additional community outreach, either through the Braddock Land Use and Environment Committee. We'll be returning to them, and another event for the public as well to talk about those changes that are being recommended. In January, assuming we have a successful hearing with the Planning Commission and we receive a favorable recommendation, we'll be going to the Board of Supervisors. And then the rezoning, which is following on the heels of the plan amendment, it's a separate process. you'll see the staff report being published in January, and then with public hearings scheduled in February, and those dates are to be determined. So for more information, I'll just leave this here with you. Again, my name is Ryan Stewart. Here's my contact information. You got my email address and my phone number. And if you either visit this URL, or you can use your camera phone here to scan the QR code, this will take you to our Plan Amendment Project webpage, which will be the best source of information for what's up to date, what the current status of the project is, and any of the meeting materials that you would like to reference. Again, these slides will go up there, the video will go up there. And so that's a resource that you all have for the community and others. But if you have any questions, or if you're not comfortable speaking here in the chat, you're welcome to contact me at any time. I'll do my best to answer those questions, or at least get you to the right person, so we're able to get those answers for you. But at this time, I will go ahead and we'll turn it over to the next speakers here, and we will talk about the applicant's proposal.
All right. Thank you, Ryan, for setting the stage for us. Appreciate it. Good evening, folks. My name is Nick Bracco. I'm with Lincoln Avenue Capital. With me is Brian Winterhalter with DLA Piper. I'm going to endeavor to conquer technology and get my presentation up on the screen here for you, which hopefully I just did. Folks see that all right? All right, great. So thanks again, Nick Bracco, Lincoln Avenue Capital. We are the selected development partner of FCRHA essentially for the redevelopment of the 4.5 acres. I'm going to just tell you a little bit about Lincoln Avenue Capital, and then I'll turn it over to Brian, who will walk you through the presentation. Kind of long story short, Lincoln Avenue Capital is a family-owned, kind of mission-driven development company. We focus on affordable and workforce housing across the country. We're headquartered in Santa Monica, California. I head up our Washington, D.C. kind of DMV region. I'm here. I live in Fairfax County and have for as long as I can remember, but long enough to be from here now. So it's exciting to be partnering with the county to be doing some of this great work. As you can see, we have about 116 properties across the country, 22,000 units, and just over 100 team members at Lincoln Avenue Capital, all focused on kind of impact and mission-driven affordable housing development across the country. So point is, we've been doing this quite a while. We have a really great track record, and have the kind of wherewithal to do something as complicated as we're proposing here at the government center. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian and let him walk you through the site and the vision and what we're trying to accomplish here. So Brian, go ahead, take it away.
All right. Thank you very much, Nick. Good evening, everybody. I'm Brian Winterhalter with DLA Piper. I'm a land use lawyer and working with Nick and the county on this development project. We're excited to be partnering with the Housing Authority, and really excited to be with you this evening and to be able to share some details about the project with you. The slide that you see here is a context slide that shows the location of the site in the center and some of the amenities and other uses around the property within a quarter mile, a half mile, and 3/4 of a mile. Some of this Ryan had already mentioned, so I'll be brief, but you see obviously the Fairfax County Government Center campus, the Government Center offices across Government Center Parkway, the large retail centers and entertainment areas at Fairfax Corner and Fair Oaks Mall, and then some of the other shopping opportunities, the parks and the elementary school here as well. Next slide, please. This slide shows an image of the northwest corner of the building. This is a nice rendering that we had the architects put together. We think they've done a really nice job with the project. As you can see on the right-hand side of the page, the proposal overall is for 291 long-term affordable housing units. Nick can give you some more detail if you're interested in the breakdown of the affordability of the units, but this is an all affordable housing project. It will include 15,000 square feet of community serving spaces. 10,000 square feet of that will consist of daycare, and another 5,000 will be a community supportive services facility. And we can talk in more detail about what that is envisioned to be as well. We will have enhanced pedestrian connectivity around and through the site. We have a large public promenade that will run between the two buildings, and we'll show you that in the plan view in the next slide or two. We will, of course, have public art as part of the project. And given that this site is located at the front door to the Government Center campus, we know that it's important to complete this project quickly once it begins. So this will be a one-phase development project, and wanted to share that with everyone that although it is two buildings, it will be a single construction project if and when we move forward with the development. Next slide, please. This slide shows you an overview of the site plan and a breakdown of the details of the residential units and the parking spaces on the left. The breakdown of the 291 units is almost evenly split between the two buildings, 145 in the northern building, 146 in the southern building. You see the bedroom count there. Just to note, that bedroom count is still a little bit in flux. You know, these things are revised as we move forward in the process. So that may shift a bit, but you get a good sense here of what we're anticipating in terms of the number of units and the bedroom count for the project. Again, I mentioned the daycare space. If Nick can point to that on the screen, that is in the northeast corner of the building, the upper right of the site, where Nick is highlighting that area. The first floor that's shown there in orange is about 10,000 square feet. And then the upper level, about half of that upper level, will be a second story space that will have the 5,000 square feet of community and supportive serving uses in there. Immediately adjacent to the left, the west, is an outdoor play area. So that part where Nick is highlighting right now is not actually building. That's dedicated play area for the daycare use. That's part of the overall interior courtyard and amenity areas within the courtyard of the building. The three pinkish colored areas are amenity spaces for the residents of the building to have various activities and programming for the residents who live in the site. We will have obviously a two building design. You see the central promenade running east-west through the site that Nick is highlighting with the mouse. That will be publicly accessible. There will be publicly accessible open spaces within the center of the courtyard. Some areas will be private for the residences, some will be publicly accessible for everyone. But overall, we envision that public promenade to be a nice, obviously walkable, pedestrian-friendly space, but also a nice area for a gathering as well. We are proposing to preserve the double row of trees that surrounds three sides of the site, the north, the west, and the southern sides. Those trees are existing. We're evaluating the condition of those trees, but our goal is to design the site and the construction of the buildings to preserve all of those trees. There is a new road on the eastern side of the site that Nick is highlighting, and that will have 13 surface parking spaces within the boundaries of the property, and then there are 13 across on the other side, so a total of 26 parallel on-street parking spaces. And among other things, we anticipate that that will be used for daycare pickup and drop off, because that road is located adjacent to the daycare area. And then the last thing to point out on this slide is the entry and exit from the garage and the loading areas, which are there on the road to the north. Next slide, please. This shows the existing and proposed pedestrian circulation. The existing pedestrian routes are in orange, and the proposed new pedestrian facilities are in blue. Of course, we have the prominent central promenade that will be publicly accessible, and a new pedestrian route through the center of the site. And then we have a new pedestrian route along the eastern portion of the site and additional crosswalk spaces as well. Next slide, please. And this is a nice rendering that we have from the architects. As I mentioned, we're really excited about the project. We're really excited about the work that the architecture team at KTGY has put into the project. This is a view from the eastern side of the site. So from the main government center building side, looking into the interior courtyard, you see some of the amenity spaces in the central area there. And then the county government buildings, the Harity building and the Panino building, are off in the background of this slide along Government Center Parkway. But we're excited to move forward. We have filed our application for this project with Fairfax County, with the Department of Planning and Development. It is under review. We have received our first round of comments from county staff, and we're working with them and collaboratively with the county on potential changes to the project to address some of the comments that we've received. We're looking forward to moving through the review process and continuing the community dialogue. And as we can talk about in more detail for any of those folks who are interested, given that this is an affordable housing proposal, we're trying very hard to stay on schedule to meet a deadline for submission for low-income housing tax credits, which is a critical part of the financing structure to make this project come to fruition. So we appreciate the opportunity to be here. We appreciate Supervisor Walkinshaw you setting up this meeting for us to present to the community. And we are here and we're happy to talk and answer any questions anyone may have.
Okay, thank you, Brian and Nick and Ryan. And now we will open it up to questions. And you have two ways to pose a question. One is to type it into the chat. And you can access the chat by hovering at the bottom of your screen and clicking chat, and the chat box should open up. The other option is to raise your hand, unmute, and ask the question verbally. You can do that by clicking reactions at the bottom of your screen and then clicking raise hand, and I'll try to call on folks in the order that your hand goes up. So the first question from the chat is, who do you hope to house in this development? And why don't I give that to Nick, Brian, or if we have anyone from HCD who's still on who would like to jump in on that question. Who do you hope to house in this development? Maybe talk us through the parameters of who might be eligible to live in this development.
I'll be glad to take a shot at that one. So the program that we're using here, the low-income housing tax credit program, allows for families who earn up to 60% of the area median income. In some instances, you can do up to 70% of the area median income. So by and large, kind of mathematically, that would be about $85,000 a year to maybe down to about $65,000 a year, depending upon the, whether it's a 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom, how many people are living there and how the program kind of calculates income. It's working families here in Fairfax County. That's kind of the by and large who it will be. This is not a I think sometimes when folks hear affordable housing, they have the preconceived notion that it's entirely subsidized. But that's not the case. Folks who live here will be working, will be earning income, will be paying rent, it's all of those sorts of things. We will have some residents here who will be further subsidized using some project-based vouchers and those sorts of things, just to make sure we receive a wide income spectrum, but by and large, it's working folks here in Fairfax County.
Okay, another question from Ann and Brian. What resistance do you foresee to this plan? I can try to respond to that. I don't. That's hard to answer at this point. I mean, I don't foresee significant resistance, but that's why we have this process and hold these kind of meetings to hear from you about maybe things that we haven't thought of. I think some of the things that we hear often with this kind of development, whether it's affordable or market rate, be concerns about traffic, concerns about environmental impact. The great news here is, as we noted, this is a location that's very well served by public transportation and a robust road network where there isn't, at least along Government Center Parkway, significant congestion. And we're taking a parking lot, right, and turning it into housing. So it's going to be a net improvement from an environmental perspective with the improvements in terms of stormwater changing a parking lot to some open usable space for folks. So remains to be seen what, if any, resistance we see, but we're going to continue to talk to the community and give folks the opportunity to share any questions or concerns they have. Next question, also from Ann and Brian. Any special set-asides for civic service employees like teachers, police, EMTs, or disability housing? And I'll let Brian and Nick jump in here if they want. There are some legal restrictions on that kind of set aside. That's a question that comes up from time to time. But Nick, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, that's right. There's certain fair housing requirements that we are legally bound to adhere to. We're working kind of with DHCD and our kind of legal folks to understand how we can set up possibly some preferences for kind of first responders or the folks doing the good work at FCPS or county employees, that sort of thing. We haven't been able to finalize all of that yet, so we're still kind of in the infancy on that part, but it's something we're looking at and would love to be able to reserve some of the units for those the people doing that good work. As far as disability housing goes, we have made a commitment to provide kind of ADA accessible units, but we don't have a kind of a commitment to hold a certain number of units for folks with a particular disability. So kind of said differently, the facility will be built in such a way that we can have folks with disabilities living there, but we don't have units that are specifically for a certain type of disabled folk or disabled person, I guess, if that makes sense. Hopefully that was helpful.
And I'll just add, in terms of the set-asides for government employees, the team knows that is a priority for me. I would like to see that happen. I think this is a unique location where that has added value, because it's a building that's going to be surrounded by thousands of Fairfax County employees, many of whom will meet the income qualifications. But as was noted, there are some legal restrictions in terms of federal law that obviously we couldn't and wouldn't do anything to violate. So we are working on that. Rebecca asks, was that a metro stop that is planned? That is a really great question, and there has been for many years a planned metro station in the county's comprehensive plan and transportation plan in the median of I-66 between Fairfax Corner and Fair Oaks Mall, and that is still in our plans. I think the reality of Metro's situation in terms of their need to focus on the core capacity of the system and dealing with the bottleneck at the Roslyn Tunnel, I think they've been quite adamant that additional extensions to Metro aren't on the table in the near future, but we certainly aren't going to do anything to eliminate that as an option in the future. So I'm hopeful that as Metro rights itself and can make the improvements it needs to make, we'll be able to restart that conversation about that Orange Line extension down I-66. But for the time being, as I mentioned, the county did or is in the process of constructing the new multimodal parking garage. And it's a lot more than a parking garage. It's going to be a bike share and ride share facility. So people will be able to drive, walk, bike, take buses, to get on express buses to go anywhere in the region. So it's going to be really a great addition to our public transportation network that folks who live in this community would be able to benefit from. And again, Okay, Ann and Brian say that we need an incentive to attract civil service employees. Affordable housing is one part of the solution to help with shortages in civil service positions. I agree 100%. Thank you for this presentation, very informative. Thank you, Ann and Brian. Any other questions? Again, you can raise your hand by clicking reactions and clicking raise hand, or enter any questions in the chat. Going once, going twice. Usually when I get to 3, someone has a question, but okay. Well, okay, there you go. Right at 3, Ann and Brian say, thank you, Ann and Brian. How can we help as citizens? Well, thank you. I appreciate that offer. And the 2 things I was gonna share to wrap up our meeting here. 1, you can send any additional comments or concerns to braddock@fairfaxcounty.gov. I also encourage you to sign up to testify at the Planning Commission's public hearing, which is currently scheduled for Thursday, December 8th at 7:30 p.m. That'll be on the comprehensive plan amendment. So those are 2 tangible things you can do, as well as spread the news to your neighbors and encourage them to weigh in as well. So if there isn't anything else, and just as a reminder, this presentation will be posted on the project website, which is in the chat. It was posted in the chat at 7:40 p.m. So feel free to share that link with others who weren't able to make it. Thank you, Sherry. Appreciate that. Okay, everyone. Thank you. I want to thank the team, especially Fairfax County staff who joined tonight and gave up your evening to participate, and especially community members who spent your evening with us as well. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.